Hey guys, welcome back to the 9th part in this Python series on the Django Web Framework for Python. So in this one we're going to be talking about the database that is going to be used to store all our data that we're using in this Django project. And that includes all the users' information in this login system, and really everything that we need in terms of the data is going to be stored in our database backend. So let's talk about that in this video. So I'm going to go to my settings.py and we're going to have a look inside some of these settings here. So it's quite a long file, as you can see, and I haven't really done much to it yet, but you can see we've got this databases dictionary. So this is just a Python dictionary, and inside it's got a key default, the default database backend, and it's got a dictionary that contains the information about the default database backend. Now your project is going to have a default database backend set to Sqlite 3 by default. So when you start this Django project, it's going to default to the same backend that I have here. I haven't changed this. So what this is saying is it's going to use the database engine that is the Sqlite 3 database, and it's going to use the name db.sqlite3, and it's going to put it in the root directory of our Django project, so this tutorial folder, and you can see we've got db.sqlite3. So this is where that's coming from. So it's got the name and the database backend. So that's where it's specified. So why am I showing you this? Why is this database thing relevant? Well, if we go and run our development server again, so I'm just going to do python manage.py run server, you can see that it says this sort of error message. The development server is still running because it says starting development server at this address, and that's great, so we can access our website. But it does say you have 13 unapplied migrations. We'll talk a bit more about migrations in a bit, and your project may not work properly until you apply all of these migrations. So run python manage.py migrate to apply them. Python manage.py migrate. So now it's applying all these migrations. So all these migrations, like this is a particular migration. So now that we've done that, what's happened is we've actually written that database structure, everything that the Django project needs so far, into the database. And to sort of illustrate what is happening here, I'm going to look at this database.sqlite3 file. And to do that, I'm going to use an Sqlite Browser, which is why I like the default database backend in Django, because it just stores your database locally and you can open it easily with a program like what I'm using, for example. You don't have to use this one, but this is the one that I choose to use. So I'm just going to my Django folder here in the tutorial, and I'm going to open up the db.sqlite3 file, which was created as part of that Django project. And you can see in this database structure, these are all the tables in the database, and if we go on browse data, we can see an individual table and all the data that it contains. So we've got auth user, and this contains a load of fields, which are these columns, that is going to be representative of one of the default Django users. So when you create an account through a registration system, for example, that could be input into this database, stored, and then when you come to log in again, it's going to look for that username in the database, and then it's going to pull out your information if you log in successfully. So we've created this now, which means that we shouldn't get another error. We shouldn't get this red error message, which you can see here, if we run the development server. So let's have a look and see what it says now. So now it's running without that migration issue. So let's go and see what happens if we just give this browser a refresh. And now we get back to the login system, which is where we were in the previous video when we made this login system. So now that we've refreshed the page, you'll see something that's familiar from the last video if you've seen that. And that's, we've got this basic login form and a button to log in with. But if you've sort of thought ahead slightly, you might realise that we haven't got any user to be able to log in with. We don't have any login credentials. And we haven't created the full registration process yet. So what I'm going to do is create one using another Django tool. So I'm going to say python manage.py to run another Django command, manage.py, called create super user. And what this is going to do is it's going to create a user, a Django user. It's going to store it in this user's database, and it's going to give that user permission to be able to log in and also to be able to administer the site using the Django admin page, which is a very, very powerful way of being able to manage your database backend. So I'm going to talk about that in the next video. But for now, I'm just going to create this super user. It's going to ask for a username. I'm going to leave that blank just so it uses Max, as it says here. I don't need to specify an email. And what I'm going to say for the password is something. Literally the word something. If you're interested, it doesn't really matter. Because this is just running locally, so it's not like you can interfere with my Django project by knowing the password. So what I'm going to do is, to be able to try and log in again as this super user, I need to run the development server first. When I was first starting to learn Django, this is one of the things I always forgot, was to run the development server before trying to refresh the page. So I'm going to go back to the web browser and give that a refresh just to make sure it's still sending the request. So I'm going to try and log in with the credentials for that super user, and then I'm going to show you the admin page. So I'm going to say Max and something, so that's my password, and now it's successfully logged in. So if we go to this database and we refresh, you can see now that we've got the ID is 1, which Django automatically set for us, the primary key of the user. It's got a password which it's storing in this very secure hashing algorithm, so it's not storing the raw password, which is very, very good, because it means that if your database was hacked into, or somehow someone got access to the passwords in the database, they wouldn't actually have the raw passwords. They'd first have to decipher the algorithm here that you can see. So that's a really, really powerful feature of Django, in that it does all that for you. It records stuff like the last login, and it's just said the username and the date joined as well. So pretty much what it's stored is the password and the username. They are the two really, really important things, and that allows us now to be able to log in. And you can see that /accounts/profile, it has logged us in and sent us to that URL. But if you'll remember, we haven't defined a URL for accounts/profile. In fact, we don't have accounts at all. We only have account. So we want to redirect to the user to account, or maybe account/home. We don't want accounts/profile. So let's change that now. So the user has successfully logged in now. This is a logged in user, but we haven't got any page, because we haven't got a URL that defines this. And the reason for that is because this is a default URL that the Django login view redirects you to, and it expects that you've created that page already because it anticipated that. But what I'm going to do instead is change this URL to be able to say just /account, maybe /home or something like that, so that we can just redirect them to a different URL. So to do that, I'm going to go to the project again, and in the settings.py, I'm going to define a new variable, and I'm going to say login redirect URL, and that is equal to, I'm going to say /account/, and now if we log in again, so we should be able to do something, log in, and now we get /account, and that takes us to the home page which we've already created in this templates accounts home.html. So that's where it's redirecting us to, because it has this URL specifying, and it's going to take us to the home view like we've covered in previous videos. Now some of you might be wondering, why is it the variable login redirect URL? Why are we defining that particular variable rather than anything else? Because this name is very important, because it's that name that allows Django to identify it as being the URL which we want to define here. So I'm going to go and look at the source code for the view that we're using. So in our urls.py we have django.contrib.auth.views, and we're importing the login function. That's what's logging us in to this application. So I'm gonna just Google for source code for Django contrib auth views, and hopefully that gets to the right file. So we've got source code for the Django contrib auth views, and this is the file that we're using, this views file. And then in that we've got a function called login. So this is the file that it's referring to, which is somewhere in our Django project, but we just can't see it. It's built into Django. And the first method in this, or the first function I should say, is the login function. And this is the function that we're calling when we're logging in. So it has the template name, and it defaults to registration/login.html, but it's also got a settings.login redirect URL. And this is where it's specified, and it's saying look in the settings file for a variable called the login redirect URL, and then it's going to resolve this URL. So that's where it's getting it from. In the next one we're going to be talking about the very, very powerful tool called the Django administration.